I'm Izzy, and I'll be reading from When Home Is Not Safe, Writings on Domestic, Verbal, Emotional, and Physical Abuse, page 79. Izzy Wilson. Why are they fighting? I asked this question of my brother Bubby, who is holding me. I don't know, he's probably drunk again, he says, distracted from my question by our parents' screams. I am 4, and Bubby is 9. The screen I am leaning into feels cooled by the air conditioning inside our house, a work trailer that we are using until we get a real home. My mother, brother, and I have just arrived here in Florida because Daddy got a job here. I'm cold, I tell my big brother. He puts his arms around mine and we peer out the window into the darkness. Our parents are illuminated by a street light. Dad punches Mom and she curses at him. I look down at my flannel nightgown. I love my daddy, the red balloons letters say. I rub them. My brother interprets this as me being cold and wraps a blanket around my shoulders. If you take him, you're taking them both, Mom screams as Dad walks toward the trailer. He's my son, and I'm taking him, Dad says. Shh. Don't say anything, Mom says to Bubby and me as we crouch behind a pile of steel beams. The sand and stickers grind into my knees and I complain. Shh, we have to be quiet, Mom says frantically. Dad appears on the horizon about 200 yards across the sandy terrain next to the construction site we call home. A dark silhouette with the staggering gait of a drunk. In his hand, in his fist, a handgun. I remain still, fearing that my breathing or heartbeat will give our location away, knowing that he will kill Mom, if not my brother and me, if he finds us. Where are you going, Daddy? I ask him a few months later, my young heart already adept at self-destructive forgiveness. Mom, Dad, my brother, and I have moved into an apartment. I love going to school, despite the gender-bending haircut I had gotten the day before I entered kindergarten, which caused a reasonable amount of teasing and subsequent anger and confusion. Having a real apartment was bliss. Their continuing loud arguments are softened by concrete walls. I don't remember what words my father said the morning he left. Later he would confess that he left to save us. All I remember, and what I was to see in my nightmares, were his big, strong hands shoving a peach washcloth into a black duffel bag. I've tried to imagine what it must have been like for my father, growing up in his skin. Bits and pieces of his life came from my mother and from his sister's poetry, which I secretly stayed up all night reading during one of her visits. His father abused them all, but Dad's abuse was the most open, especially after Dad's brother died. Quote, he made it clear that I wasn't wanted, end quote. Dad told me once. I knew the feeling. At least 2 of Dad's sisters were raped by their own father. One was impregnated by Grandpa. Dad's involvement in their home life ended after his father discovered him sleeping under the porch with the dogs. Grandpa had thrown Dad out some weeks earlier into the bitter Missouri winter, and Dad had found refuge there with the dogs and some blankets his mother had smuggled out to him. As Dad was running from the inevitable beating that was coming, Grandpa shot him in the back with buckshot, and then sent him off to the military. Before his recent death, my father lived alone and worked 70 hours a week, traveling to his camp in the Everglades to airboat when he could. He was loneliness incarnate, taught to shut down his emotions when he was very young, and having learned his lessons well, unable to regain those emotions. Anger was difficult to get to later in his life because the emotions all blended together in a blue-gray hue. When asked why I didn't attend the funeral to grieve for my father, I simply replied, I've been grieving my whole life. And with that, I want to to read a poem. Incidentally, that was my first memory when he tried to kill us. And it's burned in my life in a way that I can't even begin to describe, and repeated itself in my life in a way that is classic textbook, but also brutal. Let me get the poem here. This poem was written partially inspired by the piece I just read, and partially inspired by some other things, which I think will be clear in the poem. 8:21. What does it mean to be silenced? My 8-year-old self holds her vagina in her palm and her mouth is sewn shut. You think horror movie, but I see muffled women at every turn. Little girls sexualized, then criticized for their sundresses, and silenced. My rapes and the handprint bruises on my arm remind me of when I tried to speak, but was silenced. The appendage of patriarchy is sure-footed when it steps on her neck in the home they share. Her caged bird is silenced. But the patriarchy forgot that silencing me put me in touch with warrior women, past and present. It gave me time to read so much that I found my vernacular amongst the formerly silent author women. It failed to anticipate shifts in my paradigm. 100,000 arrows shoot from my ears, and the hydra reaches out like Medusa snakes as I nurture my lost voice, and suddenly I am 21 in an intro to sociology class where they are showing the extremities. This causes me to weep and scream violently, unbinding my 8-year-old lips. I toss my vagina angrily at the blackboard and command my audience with words I never knew that I knew at 8 or 15 or even yesterday. Words that I didn't know could exist in my mind, my mouth, my very being. Then little Izzy remembers her place and grows quiet and sullen. But the crowd has already made their decision. They heard the visceral cries and guttural moans. I am exposed. Mascara trails my cheeks and puddles in my bra as I await the guillotine that shall silence me once and for all. But the applause of sisters saying me too, and the ghosts of women who beat the fucking path to being loud and taking up space reminds me that I do, in fact, have a tremendous cacophony of voices behind me telling me things as simple as I love how eloquently you speak to the deeply profound whispers of my she ancestors, the underlying message meant to empower me, to give me volume and depth to my voice. So, scarred as I may be, my voice tonight speaks for all of my sisters still cauterized by others or simply muffled by social mores and expectation. Take up space, bitches, tear down walls, impeach, implore, impale the patriarchy.